Hi, friends. Hi, leaders. Frank Beeler, Jim Shepard, next Sunday podcast.
Next Sunday. Hey-o.
Next Sunday. We don't need to go down that road again. We've already done that a couple of times, right?
That's right.
It's next Sunday. But what happens next Sunday could change everything, and that's why we're here, right? So, I love our topic today, and I love that you're going to be the primary voice on this topic today. I've got some thoughts on this, but you've got 6 kids.
True.
You've got Zeke.
Yep.
And you got James.
Yep.
And you got 4 in between.
That's right.
And we're talking about shifting priorities for younger generations. And of course, you know, I sit in a room with a lot of younger leaders, but you see it in leadership rooms and at home.
Yeah. And
you're watching where it's coming up even in the generation behind the people that I'm sitting in the room with. And so I love that we're going to talk about this today, because I think it's, if you're not talking about it in your church yet, you're going to be talking about it in your church. Would that be a fair way to say this?
Absolutely.
So why don't you kick us off? You had some top of mind things. Give us kind of a preview of where we're going to go in this conversation today before we get started.
Yeah. There has been a tectonic shift.
Tectonic.
Okay.
Do I need to look that up?
No, it's fine. We'll
University of Georgia degree. Limited vocabulary.
That's it. There's been a seismic shift.
Seismic. I love
shift.
that.
How's that? In the parenting and marriage season of life that we're seeing a younger generation go into. So they're getting married later.
Correct.
They're having kids later. Mm-hmm. And yet our children's ministries, the way we're approaching and serving young families hasn't changed much over the last few decades.
Shocker.
And so, shocker. So once again, here we are. There's been this seismic shift in young families and when they're formed and how they're formed, and yet we haven't made any modifications.
Yeah.
We've been feeling it as church leaders because we've seen the frequency of attendance continue to decline. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, all the COVIDs, all in between. We've seen this shift occur without a doubt. And yet, I think there are some nuances and some insights that if we understood what was really happening with young families, and once again, the timing of when they're formed, it might change the way we speak to young leaders, the expectations we have of young people in our church, and maybe some of the things we've taken for granted in the past, like the fact that for many, many decades, at least 3 that I can tell, okay, 70s, 80s, 90s, the church relied on this simple truth. Oh, well, they grew up, they went to college, they left the church, but when they get married and have kids, they'll come back. And that was a pattern that was true for several decades. They sowed their wild oats, they did whatever, but then once they had kids, there was this gravitational pull back to church for all different kinds of reasons.
This is feeling really personal, Frank. I mean, you're stepping on my toes over here. It's feeling very personal
Just saying,
at this point.
Gravitational pull back to church.
This is what happened to me.
Right. But it's not happening.
It's not happening anymore.
It's
That's
not
right.
the same
That's right.
at
It's not
all.
the same. Not the same.
And so what was a foregone conclusion. So if we miss that gap of ministry of young adults, it was okay because many were going to make their way back eventually anyway. And that is no longer a true statement.
Yeah.
And so that's just where I want to push in today. I want to look at some of the most recent research and insights and discuss how those trends may be affecting ministry.
Well, now let's just make it clear. It was not a foregone conclusion that I was going to end up back there. In fact, it surprised a lot of people when they heard about it.
Yeah.
You know, that I'd given my life to Christ at a church service on Palm Sunday, 1983. You know, it's like, wait, him? And then, of course, they're like, well, that could only happen with Jesus. Oh, yeah, that's how it happened. Yeah. Would take that. But I love the fact. So here's the idea. What's frustrating to you and frustrating to me is that we watch leading edge marketplace companies keep pace with sociological change, and the church is not doing that.
Right.
And that's what we're here to talk about today, is how do we close the gap on our ministry strategy and our approach, especially family ministry, and how it's missing the mark in terms of the sociological change that's happening right in front of us. That'd be a good way to summarize
That's
this?
exactly right.
See?
Exactly right.
I just said that in different words.
You summarized it much better. You're so eloquent.
Look, I didn't need for you to go to seismic because I actually like tectonic.
Yeah,
that was
you
a
like
great
tectonic.
word.
Yeah,
but here's the thing, though, Frank. you and I both see this, and there are enough leaders that see us, but there's not enough churches that are actually acting on this. So let's talk through today.
Yeah.
This is the whole idea. What happens next Sunday could actually change everything. There's some things in here that are going to be longer term fixes. There are going to be some things that you can put into place fairly quickly, right? Some of the ideas that you hear here today. So kick us off. Go where you want to go first.
Absolutely. So let's start with just an interesting fact. Most recent research, 18 to 24-year-olds. Okay, we're talking about that age group. Mm-hmm. In 1968, 55% of them still lived with their parents, 18 to 24-year-olds. Okay, in 1968. In 2023, that number has grown to 71%. Okay, so that's grown. While the number that's decreased is during that same time frame, in 1968, when I said 55% were living with their parents, 40% of 18 to 24-year-olds were living with their spouse. They were already married, 18 to 24. Guess what that percentage is now in 2023 of 18 to 24-year-olds living with their spouse?
Well, I already saw the show notes, so I know the answer.
6%.
It's crazy, isn't it?
From 40% to 6%. That means they're simply not getting married in that range whatsoever,
Nuts.
And more are living at home. And yet we have this mindset that all 18-year-olds are going off to college. So if they're not in our ministry, they went somewhere and they went off to college, and then who knows where they went after that. Mm-hmm. Well, everything indicates that if they did go off to college, they made it back home. That's where they're at. They're back home. So the people that you're like, we'll see them. We've got a great young couples ministry. Well, they're 23 and they're back home, and they're not living with their spouse. They're back home. And yet we're not building ministry that way. We're assuming that there's this leap that happens that basically goes for most churches. We say they go off to college and then they get married and end up in a couples class in our church, and that's how we do ministry. So the young adult ministry, the need for young adult ministry, non-coupled, non-married ministry is massive because people are waiting longer and longer to get married. Now, significantly later. In fact, childbirth has obviously followed along behind that, right? So now get this. The average family is having their kid, the blended average across our nation is now at 27 years old. They're having their first kid now.
Crazy stat. Really.
5-6 years later than it was just a couple decades ago. The majority of year over year that we're seeing now are having their first child in their 30s. So that number is going to quickly creep up to be 30, 31 as the blended average of first child. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that there's this gap in ministry where we are assuming they're either in a married couples group or a college group, and we have nothing for them in between.
Well, and I can see that in my own house. So both of my girls, they had their children, in their 30s.
Yeah.
You and Jess, you all got married. You got married in the 18 to 24 zone, right?
Absolutely.
So you were in that zone. So, I mean, there's this shift that's taking place, but nothing's changed in the church. And we're wondering, why are we not able to reach these kids? Why are we not able to reach young adults and disciple them well and lead them? Because our whole structure is not set up for what they're doing today.
So, and when we talk about making a change for next Sunday, that could make a big difference.
I saw what you did there.
Quit talking about them as either college students or married.
Right.
There's a whole nother demographic.
There's a whole other category. Right. There's a whole other category.
For some reason, we just, in our sermon illustrations, and our casual conversations. So there's a programming shift that's got to happen. If 71% of 18 to 24-year-olds are living at home, okay, that's remote college, going straight into trades, coming back from college, that's not a bad thing at all. That just means they're back in your backyard. We think that if we don't live in a college town, we're not going to have a thriving young adult ministry. And yet 71% are living at home, so they didn't go anywhere. They're just not at your church anymore. Why? Because maybe we're not offering anything that engages to them, and when we do, we're lumping them together with young married couples and or college students, and we're having this gap.
Yeah, so
between.
Let's think about it this way, Frank. So I leave and I go off to college and I come back and I'm one of the 71%.
Yep.
My mom and dad are still at that church. That's a church that I grew up in. I have nothing against. I don't have church hurt. I don't have anything like that. I'm actually looking at the church that raised me before I went to college, and I'm looking for a place for me to fit in now that I'm back, and I don't see anywhere.
Right.
And so now my choices are I've either able to find another church, but if so many churches are missing it, I probably won't find it there. And I'm just like, what do I do?
So we wonder why we will see these ministries all across the nation, these pockets of ministry that are crushing it with this age group. And we're like, why are they driving so far? Why are they convening together? And my thought is, because no one else is doing it.
Yeah, nobody else is doing it.
So they're seeking it out and looking for these pockets that are getting massive.
Yeah.
Because the church aren't doing it. If you want to make a shift, very simply, to engage that population group is invite them into serve and with your outreach partners and in the church. You may not be able to make some epic young adult ministry tomorrow. You may need to figure out how you're going to staff that or program that or kind of build that over time. Right. But there's an opportunity for service and engagement that you have a group of people that many of which are not choosing to say, I don't believe in Jesus anymore. I don't like the church. That's not what they're saying. They're just going, where do I fit? When I was last here, I was in youth ministry of whatever that looked like for your church. And now I've come back and I don't know where I belong. And it's kind of a wonky place for them to be. And
if you think about it from their perspective, Frank, it has to be confusing, perplexing, because this is the church I grew up in. This is my mother. This is who raised me.
Right.
Right. And you're right. When I was last here, I was in this phenomenal youth group that then sent me off to college. And now I'm back home and I'm looking at the church that I love and there's no place for me.
The interesting thing, that's absolutely right. The interesting thing is when we see students go off to college, whatever that means, however far that is, they move on a campus, or they travel all across the country or whatever, we stop talking to them because they're no longer part of our ministry. And I would just say the stats show 71% are coming back to your backyard. And yet we do a graduation party for them. And we oftentimes will give them a Bible or a gift or a send-off thing. And then that's the end. There's nobody responsible for saying, hey, how'd that first week at college go? How's it going? My son Isaac is 18. He's the first one to go out of state to college. He loves our family. He loves our church. I don't know, and I'm going to have to talk to Gerald about this, Pastor Gerald. I don't know who's got him. Like, honestly, I don't know who's going to be the one to check in week 2 or 3 of college to make sure he's doing okay. Because here's what I know. He's coming back. He's going to be back here for all the holidays. He's going to be back for the summer. And then statistically, when he graduates college, he's coming back. Most likely moving back in with me. I don't know that I had that in my
71% chance that's going to happen.
71% chance he's moving back into my house. And yet we stop talking to them as though they've now moved on and they're in someone else's care. And yet that's simply not true. So what do you do next Sunday? Here we are. We're at the beginning of the college season. Who's checking in with all those seniors that have left and gone out? Who's writing those cards? Who's checking in on them? Who's sending that text message? Because they're going to be back in just a few weeks. At Thanksgiving, they're going to be back at your church or not. Because as soon as they left, you forgot about them and they were no longer connected.
Yeah. So, Frank, let's talk. Let's begin to think through what does it look like for a church that hasn't addressed this issue to begin thinking through. How would I address this issue? What are some practical ideas that we can give them in thinking through? Not the say all end all, but if I haven't thought about this issue and I want to begin thinking about this issue, where's a good place for me to start?
Okay. Oftentimes, large churches have staff and they do something with young adults to some degree. And so they have some plan. So I'm going to put a pin in that and speak to the churches that don't have that dedicated staff member for just young adults or the average size church is trying to figure this out. I think there's this unique place to start to say, hey, congregation. Like I generally think it's this simple. Hey, congregation, we just sent out some leaders. Some young people from our church, you were here, you prayed over them, you saw us send them out. We've got a list of them, and we want to know, who of you have a connection with them where you would check in on them? You would build a relationship. We're not doing Zoom small groups all across the country trying to line everybody's schedule for college sessions and doing all that. It's as simple as going, who from our church, preferably 5 leaders, all the statistics. Kara Powell has done fascinating research at Fuller Youth Institute to say if a young person has 5 different adults of varying ages that have some sense of a relationship with that child will find themselves either back in that church or another church as they navigate the treacherous waters.
Wow.
5. The statistics go through the roof.
That's a crazy
And
number.
so simply saying, hey, who's got Ashley? Who's got so-and-so? Who's got Isaac? Who's calling Josh? Who's sending that text message? Divide and conquer. And you're asking them to send a card or a text message once a month, once every 2 weeks, and literally have somebody, a volunteer in your church, say, I'm going to pastor these 18 or 25 and make sure there's people just nudging them, saying we're still here, saying we love you through cards, text messages, thought about you, here's a prayer, could make a huge difference as early as next Sunday.
Love that. I love that idea.
Yeah.
Love that idea. And I've seen some variations of that over the years, but not applied in an intentional, focused, consistent way. So what you're saying is the key is not when they come back, but maintaining contact after they leave for college, so that when they come back, you've got a natural connection. You've never lost connection with them. You now can say, hey, Isaac, now that you're back home from SEU and your time there, let's talk about what your next step looks like here at church.
That's right. And somebody that's looking forward to seeing them when they come back. Oh, man, you're going to be back for Christmas break? I can't wait to see you. There's that nudge toward, I can't wait to see you at church. I hope you have a great time. Enjoy seeing your family here every week. It just makes me feel connected to something instead of just floating out there looking for my next thing, which may or not be anchored in Jesus.
Yeah.
And so there's this simple way. So I think that seismic shift, that is 71% of 18 to 24-year-olds are living at home, is a new perspective of going, oh, we thought they were being sent out to someone else's care. And the answer is that simply, statistically, more than half are going to be right there in your backyard. It's our responsibility to pastor them, even while they go off for a season that may be 4 full years, maybe 5 years, maybe 1 year, maybe 6 months, maybe they never leave.
Yeah.
All those things could be true. And yet in our mind, in our ministry, in our programming meetings, we're talking as though everybody that graduated high school sent off and they're someone else's responsibility. And I guess we'll see them in 4 years. And that's simply not true.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm thinking about, the correspondence, the text messages, the phone call every now and then, maybe a box, a gift box around exam time, right? That's got some healthy snacks in it.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't eat healthy snacks before exam, but stuff like that. Just to, hey, we're thinking about you, bro. We're thinking about you, sis. We want you to do well. We're for you.
That's right.
We're connected to you. I'm thinking about the idea of, what if we could kind of help them find a place where they could worship on a regular basis in the city where they go.
Right.
So if they go to Athens, Georgia, maybe I know the 2 or 3 churches over in Athens, Georgia that would be a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And maybe if they went to Knoxville, you're like, hey, I know 2 or 3 good churches up there in Knoxville, or wherever it might be that we develop relationships. And, there'll be the kid who goes to the college and like, well, I'm doing a little homework here, but help them find a church, because in every college town, there are churches that love to nurture college kids while they're there.
Right.
That they see that as their ministry.
Yeah.
Right. So we hand them off to a church like that while they're gone, and then they return them back to us, and it's a much healthier transition because we never lost touch with them anyway.
That's right. At some point, we viewed high school graduates as someone else's ministry.
Yeah.
And
we prayed over you, gave you a Bible, and sent you out and said, good luck and God bless.
Yep. And yet,
and we meant well.
Say, we meant well. It's not a bad thing. And for most people, that's attainable. It's 10, 15, 20 graduates, maybe, for most churches, if that. To nurture them and follow up with them would be great. So what I would do is I would start with your current rising senior class. Let's start to build a relationship before they go away.
I love that.
Of saying who's nudging, who's doing those texts, how's graduation? Maybe they even go to graduation. That small group that can kind of facilitate that. And then that nurturing responsibility as they go out. Just another voice of encouragement. Sending that prayer, sending that text message can be gold. Now, as we get through college, okay, or vocational school, or whatever they choose to do, we have now 71% of those that are going to be in our backyard to minister to. So we've got this young adult ministry, but we're also seeing, as we highlighted at the beginning of this episode, that they're waiting longer and longer to get married. Yeah. My wife and I, we grew up in East Tennessee. We didn't know what else to do. When we got married, I was 21. She turned 21 on our honeymoon. And so we were super early, Jim.
Frank.
Super early.
Frank.
It's like, hey-oh.
Frank.
And so we're a year and a half apart. We're like, what else do you do in East Tennessee? You get married, and then within a year, you have a baby, right?
Yeah. I mean, same thing was true in Georgia.
Yeah,
Same thing was true here.
That's true. That's not a reality. If I did ministry that way, I'd be totally missing the mark. Mm-hmm. And so now we have this season of, okay, they've come back. Maybe they have a relationship that they're in. Maybe it's a long-distance relationship, whatever it may be. But now they're back home.
Yeah.
And so how are we strategically ministering to them and not assuming or trying to facilitate a marriage when they get back, but just saying, hey, we're not just doing couples hangout time. We want you to have a place that you can serve together, to build relationships and have a safe place still in the church. And I think having honest conversations among your congregation, among your leadership team of where do these people land when they get back, if they've been gone for 4 years, if they choose to come back to your church, what are they coming back to? What are you inviting them back to? They're in a unique season of life. How are we, once again, recognizing them in our sermons, recognizing them in our programming and gathering, and what are our expectations of the gathering? And here's the thing that I think we get super sideways on. We think, oh, if we're going to do a young adult ministry, it's got to be epic, melt your face off, massive. And it's probably not going to be any of those things, certainly to start. Yeah. And certainly not if you're in a college town. You know, that injects its own energy into it. But what if we just take whoever it is and be intentional about the way that we structure our small groups, our gatherings and whatnot, give a place for them to be where you're not imposing expectations on them. I think it could be a big difference. That little shift of going, how do we care for this group of people and not get discouraged that population group is small compared to your overall church. They still need ministry. They still need care. So what we know is that if they're getting married later, having kids later, and we don't bridge that gap in ministry, what is the likelihood they're going to come back or engage in the church once they have a family? Well, here's the interesting stat. So in 1970, the average woman had her first child at 21 years old. That was the average. So that means many were younger.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Now, as of 2022, it's already shifted later, but as of this study, it's now 27. Okay. That was 2 years ago. Now it's 28 and a half based on the newest study that I saw. But this study says 27.
That's a big delta. That's a big delta, Frank. That's a massive delta.
Huge shift.
Yeah.
Right. So when that shift occurs, there's this other thing that's happening that's becoming a problem with a new generation for the church. Not a problem with the generation, problem for the church, okay? When you have a child and you're 21 years old, you thought you knew everything, but you quickly realize you don't know everything. You're still trying to figure out your career. You're very most likely still driving the car your parents helped you finance or buy or gave you, okay? You haven't possibly even acquired your first home yet. You're in an apartment or rental or whatever at 21. There was a need for support from the church.
Yep.
By having children later, that need from the church is perceived to be less. So now they've already bounced from one career to another to possibly another, most likely their third true career. They've stabilized their income. They're outside the house. They lived at home longer, so they were able to save up some money, figure out what they actually wanted to do, many of them. And so by the time they're married, they're more stable in many things. They don't know anything more about marriage. They're still new to marriage. Yeah. But the perception is they're more stable. They have their rhythm. They have their finances. They have their place they've chosen to live. They have a friend group. They're more stable. So now what we used to enjoy as a crutch in ministry, in that, they're going to have kids, not know what to do, and they're going to need us. They're going to come back because they just need a break. They need somebody to help with childcare. They just need somebody to care for them.
Yep.
They need a break. Suddenly, that's getting messed up because suddenly they're going, okay, what does the church do for me? Why do I need to go back to church? I'm good. I've got one kid. I'm more stable with life. My finances are a little more stable. I'm in a very different circumstance now than they were in the 70s per this study. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean for us? That means that on a Sunday morning, most families of preschoolers and younger are having a conversation. What's the best thing for us to do today as a family? And they are weighing going to church and going on a hike as equal weight.
Yeah.
Going on a family activity together is good. They perceive that as good. It is good. Bonding, family time, that's great. Yep. Oh, wait, you want me to go to church? You're going to separate us from each other. We're not even getting family time together. Okay? You're separating us. Or I can go do this hike thing together. Wouldn't that be fun to do? And we'll pack a picnic. Suddenly, I'm not in desperate need, and I'm holding on. So if I'm not coming off the rails, I'm wrestling now between perceived two good things. Yep. Going to church is a good thing. Having good quality family time is a good thing. And that is a massive shift in the way new young families are thinking.
So we've got this significant sociological change that's now visiting itself in a very real way in the life of the church.
Yes.
Currently, it's a whiff. Mm-hmm. We're missing this a lot more than we're hitting it. Mm-hmm. That's why we're talking about it today. And so what we're saying is the win is that you are now creating a real, or what do I want to say, a relevant nurture system for somebody in the natural cycle that they're going through today, which is very different than, I'm older than you, so certainly back when I came up and even when you came up, which is between, probably about halfway between now and me, right? And so we're seeing these different realities. And what you and I are trying to say today is, as the church, pay attention to what's happening right in front of your face. Mm-hmm. And leverage this as an opportunity for you to rearrange your ministry or even create new ministry that dives right into this massive opportunity and creates significant connection with these people that then puts them in position where you can disciple them, mentor them, and give them a chance for long obedience.
Absolutely. Because what we are seeing now, and Glue has done some really interesting study around this.
Yeah, they've done a lot.
Is we're finding that when young families hit turmoil, their solution source first is Google. Second is family. And not even in the top 5 is church. Because we've not been in their life through that season. We've not been present enough. So statistically, we've fallen off the grid in being part of the support system. So they're Googling answers to their problems before going to their family or the church. But if we've been persistent, we've been fighting for relationship, caring for them, nurturing for them, just showing up randomly from time to time.
That's right.
Randomly, but consistently. Here's the thing. If I could get one thing across in this episode, it's we have to remain consistent even if they become inconsistent. If they become inconsistent in their attendance, we're consistent. We're consistent in our follow-up. It may feel random and spontaneous, that text message, that care package that shows up. Oh, it's been a couple months, and then here we show up again. But the reality is our consistency is a requirement, I believe, to nurture them through this season. So even if it has to get to a breaking point where something, their picture perfect thing isn't so picture perfect and they need help, suddenly now the church is part of the conversation. And that's gotten kind of left to the wayside. And it's like there's someone else's responsibility. And when they circle back, we'll start to nurture them again. And we miss out with these opportunities along the way.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said here, Frank. All of us have been, I think all of us have probably been involved in a ministry opportunity where maybe we tried something new and we're just like, well, hey, they're not responding. And so we back off. And what you're saying is you're advocating, no. These people may or may not respond, but your responsibility is to press on and to stay in that. Even if I keep sending you, you're away at college and I send you notes and a text message and Chick-fil-A gift cards and chocolate chip cookies and whatever else I send you, and you haven't acknowledged that, that doesn't give me a pass to jump off. I keep doing that because it's the right thing to do, because it's a ministry focus that we've adopted. And don't back off, because caring for these people has its reward somewhere down the road. You may not see it early on, but that doesn't give you permission to back off and quit. Maybe even you double down.
Yes, and it's one of the things I miss with most non-denominational churches today. I didn't grow up in church. You know this. I moved my letter
of membership. Yeah, your letter of membership.
Letter.
Yeah,
okay, my letter of membership.
Yep.
Okay. We take the posture as though when people become young adults that they have moved their membership letter somewhere else, but we have no idea where it went. They just took it one day. And in my mind, what if we shifted our mindset to go, unless we know they're in someone else's care,
I love this.
They're in our care.
That's right.
And wouldn't that be like healthy for us? And once again, I'm not talking about hundreds or thousands or some overwhelming number. For most churches, we're talking about this year, 10 or 15 students that we've continued to fight for a relationship and care for and share the gospel with in moments of good, bad. Sometimes all we get is a tap back. We get a thumbs up. We set up a care package and we got thanks. That's all we got. That's fine. We weren't doing it for that reason. We're wanting them to know that the love of Christ is with them no matter where they go. And once again, if we don't know that they've moved their membership letters somewhere else, figuratively, then they're our responsibility.
Yeah.
Instead of it being, well, we know they went off to college because I don't know who's got them. And go ahead.
I love that kind of reversing out the paradigm. Rather than assuming that you're going to someone's care, until I know for sure you're not in someone's care, you're in my care.
Yes.
My church, our ministry is taking care of you. And you're going to have to be the ones like, hey, I've actually reaffiliated and this is my church. Until you say that, then we're still going to hold you as being the primary care giver for you, spiritual caregiver.
Absolutely.
I love that idea.
Absolutely.
That's a
and
great
when
thought.
you nurture, when you do this consistently, when you find out that they're getting married or they're having their first child, then you send that care basket. Say, hey, we're so excited for you. We've already printed a tag in the ministry. They're already set up in membership. They're already logged in the system. We've got them ready for you whenever you want to come. We know their birth date. We know their name. We just look online, look on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. We're like, hey, we got you. We're here. We're ready for you. We'd love for you to see our new children's ministry space we've done. I don't know if you've seen it yet. You haven't had any reason to go back there yet. Man, I'd love to show you around. You have a reason to kind of nudge them. I think it just carries a weight and a responsibility that doesn't have a clear ROI, which is a future message session for us, where we're going to talk and challenge some of our ROI thinking when it comes to ministry. So at the end of the day, I would just encourage you to say the data is not just anecdotal. It is clear,
very clear,
that there's been a significant shift in the timing of marriage, timing of babies, and the location of the people graduating out of your ministry. And the question is, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And for most, we've acted up till today like nothing has changed.
Yeah. And we've got to change that. And that's our message today. There's this major sociological shift that's by and large being overlooked, neglected by the church. It's right in front of you. And hopefully what we're giving today is not all the answers, but just a prompt. Hey, go look at this. You'll probably find a ministry opportunity, a very real ministry opportunity that you can activate some of it very quickly. Like you say, this is the season where college students are starting to head off to college. This would be a great time to start this and say, who are the kids that graduated as seniors in the spring of this year that are now going off to college? Who's got them? Who's got them? Let's make sure that we have at least 3 people on every one of these kids. Every one of these kids that are going off to college, and that we commit to this level of communication, this level of care, and this level of making sure that we don't drop the ball in these kids that are basically children of our house, our church. And until somebody tells us differently, they're under our care and not somebody else's. I love that message for us as we go out of here today.
Absolutely.
And that could be something that could happen when?
Next Sunday.
Next Sunday, because what happens next Sunday could
change everything.
Change everything. Frank, thank you for your passion around this. You drove a lot of the content today because you're just wired for this. You see it up close and personal as a church leader and as a guy who has 6 kids in his own house. And I just love your passion for this. And our hope is that for you in the church, this gives you an opportunity, a window to see something that might be right in front of your face, but you haven't seen it as clearly, and now you do. And you've got a pathway forward. So God bless. May this be a great season for you, and we'll see you
next Sunday.
Next Sunday.